Welcome back to So Much and More to Say. My name is Nafemi, and I'm very, very, very happy that you are here to listen. It has been a while since I posted my last episode. The last one I posted was in June of 2024 when I talked about the amazing film Godzilla Minus One. So it's been about a year and a half, a year and 7 months since I've updated this podcast. I am sorry, life really did get going for me. I graduated from my undergrad in 2024 and then I moved back home. I was looking for a job and then months later I got a job and then I started working that job. So I've just been doing some things have been happening, great things. And so my creative exploits kind of took a back seat in a way, more so like this podcast and then filmmaking. But by the grace of God, this year they're coming to the front seat. So much and more to say is back. Thank you for being here to listen. I really appreciate it. So in this episode, I'll be talking about some highlights of the things I watched in 2025 and also touch on some honorable mentions. But let's get into the episode. The first film I'm going to talk about is Tetris. And Tetris is actually the first film I watched in 2025, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. I initially put it on to play in the background whilst I edited pictures, but then I just became too interested in what was going on in the film that I think I actually stopped editing pictures at some point to give it my full attention. It was that good, for me at least. I really enjoyed it. It's a 2023 biographical thriller based on the events around the developer of the game and a man who wants to acquire the rights for it. And it more so follows the man who wants to acquire the rights rather than the developer, but the developer still has a main role to play in the film. The man who wants to acquire the rights is called Hank Rogers, and he's played by Taron Egerton. And in seeking to get the rights, he has to travel between Japan, the US, Russia, but I think he spends more time in Russia than the other places. It was directed by John S. Baird and written by Noah Pink. And like I said, I really enjoyed this film. I think it was super exciting. It wasn't what I would have expected of a biographical thriller. I typically don't associate a biographical film with like excitement. Not that that means biographical films are boring, but I just feel like they have a certain tone to them that's not like this one. Like this film felt more like an espionage thriller than what I would have thought it would be about. And yes, it captivated my attention. I couldn't focus on editing pictures. I had to see what was going on fully, completely. And it kind of elicited the same feeling you would get from like playing a video game or reading a book that's really exciting. And I think the soundtrack is also one of my favorite parts of it. Even though there's only one song from the soundtrack that I really enjoy listening to, it's the Japanese version of Holding Out for a Hero. But I think the whole soundtrack really did work well together when the scenes were going on. And I think that's one of my favorite parts of any production. I really like when the soundtrack or the score just clicks well with everything. I really liked the pacing of the film. It Nothing really lingered too much from what I can remember. I think everything got to the point and got going as needed to. And definitely the pacing and the editing helped to build suspense where it needed to. And I like the editing too. There were parts of the film where it would transition from one scene to the next, but it had like this Tetris kind of design to everything. And I remember that there was like a car chase towards the end of the movie that basically felt like you were just watching a video game, which was pretty cool. All in all, for Tetris, I gave it 4 stars out of 5, and I do recommend watching it. I believe it should be available on Apple TV, but I think it's for renting. I remember like the first week of January, I remember Apple TV was doing this thing where you could watch anything for free. Was it for one day only or was it for 3 days? I can't remember exactly, but I know it was doing this thing where you could watch anything on Apple TV for free. So I watched Tetris. So I didn't have to pay for it, but I think you might at this point. But yeah, 4 stars out of 5. Amazing, exciting, super interesting. You should probably check out the Japanese version of Holding Out for a Hero. It's an awesome song. Next, I'll be talking about Barking Dogs Never Bite. This film might be the one that surprised me the most, or at least I'm surprised I laughed as much as I did. It's a 2000 dark comedy about a university lecturer that gets really frustrated by the sound of a dog barking, so he decides to deal with the dog himself. And by deal with, it's more on the sinister side of things. This movie was directed by Bong Joon-ho, who's a very famous director. He also made The Host, which I also watched for the first time last year, and he also wrote and directed Parasite, which won Best Picture at the Academy Awards in 2020. Along with directing this film, he also wrote it with Song Ji-ho and Derek Song-tae-eun, and it was so absurd. It was so out there. It was just so peculiar, and I loved it. It genuinely made me laugh. And it made my mom laugh too, because my mom sat down to watch it with me at some point and she was laughing as well. And I felt bad for laughing sometimes, but it just the film was just actually like it was just crazy and it had this offbeat, peculiar vibe to it that I found really interesting and really intriguing. So throughout the film, we have the university lecturer who just can't really he just can't stand dogs, and multiple dogs kind of fall victim to him. And then there's another character, a young woman who desires to be a good Samaritan and do good, so she takes it upon herself to start finding out what's happening to all these dogs when they suddenly, start going missing. And there's one scene that made me laugh so much. It's where the main guy of the production, the one that hates the dogs, he has this dog and he's on the rooftop of the building he lives in. And he's basically dangling the dog over the side of the building, debating on throwing it off. And from a building or two away, we can see the young woman looking at the man, and she's absolutely appalled by what's going on, but she's watching intently to see what's going to happen. And so he's dangling the dog over the balcony, or not the balcony, the rooftop. And initially he decides, no, I'll spare the dog. He decides it's okay. But then all of a sudden, he just suddenly turns around and throws that dog over the rooftop. And it genuinely made me burst out laughing. And I felt so bad for laughing. But if you watch the scene, the way it happens is just genuinely hilarious. It like the scene just threw me off completely. But I think Bong Joon-ho has a very interesting and unique talent at presenting such an absurd story in a way that's so interesting and entertaining. And I think I watched this film and I was just thinking like I have to like I really want to sit down with this man and like talk to him about how like what his creative process is like, how he came up with this idea, why he did it the way he did, like how he organized everything to elicit the tone and everything the way it came out, because it was honestly amazing. And I actually watched a video that pretty much explains more in depth what the movie was about, and it's called Understanding Barking Dogs Never Bite. Life is Unfair, and I believe it's by this YouTube channel called Film is Just Moving Pictures, and it looked at the whole production from the perspective of life being unfair. And that's really seen through what happens with the two different characters that kind of lead the story. They kind of have they foil each other in a way. And so the university lecturer who goes around doing all these bad things to the dogs and being dishonest, he never really faces the consequences of his actions and is almost rewarded with like a full-time position at the end of the film, whereas the woman who does all this good work and really works hard to defend and protect these dogs, she doesn't get any recognition at all. So it's kind of looking at how the film touches on this theme of bad behavior often being rewarded in society, whereas good behavior is overlooked. So yeah, Barking Dogs Never Bite. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I watched it on Tubi, so it should still be on Tubi right now. So if you want to watch it, you might have to suffer through some ads, but it's worth it because the film is awesome. Now I'll talk about Juror Number Two. Juror Number Two, I watched this film when I was on the plane back from Florida. So my friend Tori, if you've seen some of my short films, you've probably seen her name and her face pop up multiple times. But yes, my friend Tori got married in Florida on the beach, and it was really beautiful. It was an amazing wedding, and I had a great time. But yes, I watched this on the plane when I was coming back home, and I was completely hooked to it. I was completely glued to my iPad. I remember when the plane landed and um I had to leave and walk to the next place I needed to go to the airport. I was glued to my iPad and I was just hoping like the Wi-Fi or my connection to the American Airlines app wouldn't cut so I could finish the episode, not the episode, I could finish the full film. I had like I think less than 10 minutes left, so I was literally at the end. And as I was walking, the app stopped working. And so I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to finish this film? Because I think I didn't see where else the film was available to watch, at least for free. Or if I had a subscription to a streaming service that was already on, I couldn't find anywhere to watch it. I didn't see it on Tubi, I didn't see Netflix, none of that. So I remember I just searched up the film online and then I saw that the ending was posted on YouTube. So I was like, okay, let me just watch it on YouTube. And it was exactly everything I needed to see at the end. So yeah, that's a little backstory as to what was going on when I was watching this film. Juror Number Two is a 2024 legal thriller, and it follows a man who's selected to serve on a jury for a murder trial that he might have some ties to. It was directed by Clint Eastwood and it was written by Jonathan Abrams. Abrams? Abrams. Hmm. Tomato, tomato? Hmm. Just can't really do tomato, tomato with people's name pronunciations. If I messed up the pronunciation of Abrams, I'm so sorry. But yes, back to the film. One thing I really liked about this production is that it really got me thinking. And when I watch productions, I do really like productions that make you think and also productions that relate back to um themes that kind of surround the human condition. And I do think, life and death and justice really tie into that. So whenever the film opens, I really like that we got a slow reveal of information about the juror. We get to see that, he's got a wife and kid on the way, and he's also a recovering alcoholic. And I like that we got that slow reveal because when the murder case or the murder trial gets going and you realize that he might be linked to it and that he might be the person responsible, you, at least maybe not you, but for me when I was watching it, I kind of had the feeling of no, I don't want it to be him. I really don't want it to be him because of just the way his life was set up. Like he, was making progress, he was doing better, he was starting a family with a woman he loved. So I just wanted it to not be him. Another thing that I thought was really interesting about the film was how it really portrayed the cracks in the justice system and how, you know, it really rests in the hands of human beings, but human beings are also pretty flawed people. I remember because I like to take notes while I watch productions, sometimes not all the time, but I remember I took a note about how the autopsy guy, it said that he was doing 5 autopsies in one day. And I don't know anything about the people that do autopsies. I don't know if maybe doing five in one day is like light work. I don't know. I don't know if doing 5 autopsies in one day is typical or if it's too much or even too little. But it just made me think about, how doing five in one day seems like a lot. So it's probable that he might have missed something or had been rushing and just messed up somewhere, possibly. And I remember the jurors just wanting to go home and just wanting to get this case like wrapped up and get out of there. And Also, the prosecutor, she was, I believe, the district attorney, and she was also running for re-election. So in a way, she might have been looking um at the case with a skewed view because she's got something in it for her if she wins this case. So she obviously she wants the defendant to be guilty because it would be better for her. It would have been better for her for, her re-election and everything. So you can really see how a lot of the characters had they were looking for confirmation bias, they had tunnel vision, they weren't really looking from an unbiased standpoint. And then also begs the question, can human beings really be unbiased? Like, is it possible to view something from a neutral standpoint? I really did enjoy watching the main character's moral dilemma because I think, you presented a character that you can root for, but then you also presented a situation that you desire justice for. So now it's like, okay, you may like the main character, but we also need justice to be served for what happened to the victim. And it just created this tension throughout the film that I really, really, really enjoyed watching. You're always thinking to yourself, is he going to make the right decision? Or as he's conducting investigations into what happened himself, is he going to see that, okay, he isn't related to the case, or is he just going to keep finding out more and more and more about how he might be? And I liked the ending. So the ending is, I don't, I think it being open-ended is debatable, maybe, because even though it doesn't officially state what happened, it kind of leans more to one direction, which I think was perfect for the film. I think for what the film is going for, it was definitely great that it didn't have like a super definitive ending. I think it helps or causes viewers to sit with the film more, to think about it, and to also ponder more on the story and the characters, which I like to do. So juror number five, oh my gosh, juror number two, not juror number five, my mistake. Juror number two got 5 stars from me because it was absolutely excellent. I loved it and I highly recommend watching it. Judging from the Letterboxd app, I think it should be available on the Apple Store, but you probably have to rent it. It says it's available on Plex, but I don't use Plex. But I believe that should have ads, not abs. But yeah, definitely recommend watching it. It's really cool. And lastly, for the main highlights of 2025, I'm going to be talking about Christmas in August. Christmas in August was, what do I say about this production? It's, it was bittersweet. Well, I don't think it was bittersweet. I think it was just bitter for me, but we'll get into that. It is a 1998 romantic drama about a terminally ill man that runs a photo studio. And in running the studio, he meets a young woman who works as a meter maid, and the two of them develop a connection. And they develop a connection, but does that connection go anywhere? We'll see. It's directed by Her Jin-oh, and it's also written by Her Jin-oh as well as Oh Seung-uk and Shin Dong-hwan. And I think Christmas in August was so beautifully and perfectly simple. It was just such a simple story told in a simple way, and that worked so well. It's composed of very minimal and simple shots, and for that reason, every shot almost lingers in the scenes. So, for people who may not know what a shot is in film, one scene is composed of many different shots. So basically, let's say one scene takes place in one location. So let's say there's a scene that takes place in the living room. So then different shots will show different, how do I describe this? The best way I can describe it is like by just actually describing. So let's say one shot shows two people sitting on the sofa and we see them, both of them on screen from the knees up. And then next we see from a person's perspective, from like them over the shoulder talking to somebody else, and then vice versa. And then maybe we see another shot of the whole living room, everything all at once. We can see the two of them sitting down on the sofa, but instead of it just being from the knees up, now their whole bodies are shown. Something like that. That's basically what like different shots are. You've got close-ups, medium shots, wide shots, extreme close-ups, and the likes and more. So I think the shots that were used in Christmas in August, they were just very simple. So there's one scene where the man who runs the photo studio, I honestly just realized I'm not using the character names in this episode. I think I only talked about one character's name in Tetris, Hank Rogers, and I didn't talk about anyone else's name. Okay. But anyways, yes. What was I saying? I lost my train of thought. So much more to say that I forgot what I had to say. Yes, I remember. There was a scene where the terminally ill man was showing his dad how to use the TV, I think how to flip between channels. And that scene goes on for about 2 or 3 minutes, but we only see everything from one shot. And it's that one shot throughout the entire scene. And that's what I mean by the scenes linger because they just stay with you a lot longer. I think typically now if that production was made, or maybe not, it's not specific to time, but maybe just the director. Like some directors or cinematographers would decide, okay, we'll show the dad and the son together, but then whenever the son is like pointing to things on the remote, we'll show a shot of that, like a close up maybe. But that didn't happen in this scene in this film at all. And I thought it worked so well because there are a lot of other scenes just like that where you just get one shot for like the full scene, and the full scene will stretch on for about maybe a minute or two, which may not seem so long, but I think when you're watching a production from one exact position, it can feel as if time really does stretch on, which I think works well for this film. And the story for me, it felt unfinished, but at the same time it felt complete. Like I felt like everything that needed to happen happened. But then I felt like there should have been more. So, let me adjust my seating quickly. So for the man who runs the photo studio and the meter maid, I feel like I should really be using the character names. I hope this doesn't sound too confusing. Okay, but for the terminally ill man and for the young woman who's the meter maid, they meet here and there at his photo studio. And I think the one time they really do meet outside of the studio is when I remember he's like walking her home, and typically, whenever they're together, they'll have conversations. There'll be like some little moments between them, but nothing too um eventful. Just like you'd honestly just think that they're friends, but whenever you see the way they act or like what they're saying, you're like, oh, there's more here, and I want this to grow, but it doesn't. Because okay, let me just finish what I'm saying. So there's one part where he's walking her home, and I think she like holds onto his arm. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, the love story's progressing. Yay. Right after that, he ends up in the hospital. And we don't know if it's for a couple of days or weeks. I'm not sure. I don't think it was ever stated. But he winds up in the hospital, and she still has no idea that he's terminally ill at all. She has no idea he's gonna die. So he kind of like up and vanishes from her perspective, and she would come to the photo studio day after day, just passing by, seeing if he's there. She would stand there and wait a little bit, and he would never come. And then there's one day she gets so frustrated, she throws a rock through the window. But anyways, he's in the hospital, and I remember his sister asked him like, "Isn't there anybody you want to update? Any girl you want to get in contact with?" And the man's like, "No, there's no need for that." And I was like, "What do you mean there's no need for that? There's a girl who's literally throwing a rock through your shop window because she wants to see you that bad. What do you mean there's nobody?" But anyway, he gets released, and he he writes a letter to her, and I think he wanted to deliver at some point, or he just went to inquire about where she was, but he basically went to, I think, her headquarters office or something like that. and he was standing outside. It's also one of the scenes where we only see one shot, which I really liked. He was just standing outside the building, and then he talks to some people, but we don't hear what he says because it's just us watching what's happening. And then the next scene is him sitting inside like a cafe shop or something, I think a bakery of some kind. And he looks out the window and sees her at work as a meter maid. And that's it. He just looks at her. He doesn't get outside. He doesn't talk to her. And at this point, I'm checking to see, I think around this point, I was checking to see how long was left, how much of the film was remaining. Because I was like, okay, like how are we going to have them meet again, resolve like whatever misunderstanding might be there, or like just have them meet up again and talk to each other again. I think I saw like there was like 7 or 10 minutes left, and I was like, oh, I wonder how they're gonna do that in 7 or 10 minutes. Surprise, surprise, they don't. So after that scene, I remember he goes back to his studio. He sits down to take a portrait of himself, and then the scene transitions to that being the portrait at his funeral. He died, and I was like, so you mean to tell me they never meet again? They never talk to each other again? He just dies? And I'm like thinking, okay, well, he wrote her a letter. So does the letter just disintegrate in the photo studio? Because what do you mean she never got to read the letter? Like the film ends with her passing by the photo studio. He's been dead at this point. Don't know for how long, doesn't really show us passage of time, but we just see she walks by the studio. And at some point in the film, he did take a picture of her. So when she walks past, she sees that that picture is now on the display along with the other photos that are are used to decorate the shop door, or is it window? And she smiles and then she just walks away. And I'm like, girl, where are you walking to? What do you mean they don't talk again? It's like things between them ended before they could begin. And I was just thinking in my head, okay, but does she ever like find out what happens to him? Like, does she ever know that he got sick and died? Because truly speaking, there would be no way for her to know because she didn't know anything else about him except that he ran the photo studio. And then one day he just stopped appearing, and his appearance ending was kind of just the closure for her, I guess. I don't I just really wish she read the letter. At the end, whenever she's like looking at the photo studio, she not her. She's looking at the studio, but then okay, okay, let me rephrase that. Whenever the movie ends, as she's looking at the photo studio and passing by and she sees her picture, there's a narration that is going on by him where I think he's reading the letter, because what else would he be reading or what else would he be saying? But I think he's reading the letter and he says, let me see if I can find the full quote. He said, I always knew that feelings of love would fade, just like old photographs. But for you, you will always remain in my heart as you are in my last moment. Thank you and goodbye. I just, I, I don't think I cried. I am definitely a crier for films whenever it really gets me emotionally, but I don't think I cried with this one. I think it definitely made my heart ache. I might have teared up, but I don't think I cried. But yeah, Christmas in August, as bitter, sweet, more bitter than sweet, I would say, as it is. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. I do think it's a really enjoyable production, and the main reason why I like it so much is just because it's so simply told and it worked so well for the story. I also think there was like a lack of music like going on in the background, and I don't know if that was like because of maybe like the budget of the film or just a like creative choice. But either way, it worked really, really well, and I loved it because it's like I don't know, it made I don't know. I don't know. It just worked so well. I watched Christmas in August on Tubi, so I think it should still be there. But I highly recommend it. I think it was great. So now I'll talk about some of my honorable mentions. The first will be Interstellar, which is a 2014 epic science fiction film directed by Christopher Nolan and also written by him and Jonathan Nolan too. Interstellar is a classic. Chances are you've probably heard of it. If not, it's a really, 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 really popular film, and it's really popular for a reason. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was actually spectacular. Everything about it was great. The score was absolutely fantastic. Moving on, I also watched Good News, which is on Netflix, and it's a 2024 black comedy film about a plane hijacking where some people in Japan hijack a plane and their desire is to go to North Korea, but South Korea intercepts them. And so South Korea gets them to come to their country instead, but they make the place where the plane lands kind of look like it's North Korea. And it's actually based on a true story. And it was really, really engaging and really fun to watch. I think Good News was, Good News was also one of my favorite watches of last year as well. It was really good. It's on Netflix. I think I already mentioned that though. But yeah, I gave Good News, let's see here on Letterboxd. I gave Good News 4 stars out of 5. And last but not least, I also wanted to mention Whisper of the Heart just because it was kind of out of my comfort zone for what I typically watch. Whisper of the Heart is a Studio Ghibli film. And okay, I think the pronunciation is Ghibli. I looked it up before I recorded this because I know some people say Ghibli, some people say Ghibli. From what I heard of the original Japanese pronunciation, the closest that comes to it, although it's not perfect, is Ghibli. But if I'm still saying it wrong, please, please, please forgive me. But yeah, Whisper of the Heart is a Japanese animation film, and I don't typically watch Japanese animation or any animation really. So like I said, it was a little out of my comfort zone. I did want to mention it because of that. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5. And I remember just being thrown off by how young the characters were. I think they were in like middle school. They were like, I think 13, 14, if I remember correctly. I remember just thinking, oh wow, they're young. Yeah. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll probably see the little um graphics I made to kind of go with each of the films I was talking about, just so that you know if you're watching, you have a little more to look at than just one image throughout. I'm not a graphic designer, so I know the graphics are probably not as great as they can be, but I did my best. So thank you for looking at them. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you next time with the next episode.